Today we'll go through the process of installing Blue Mountain mesh on a Longline roof using our screw-free process. So the first step is we'll install all the clips along the edge of the gutter. They simply clip on with these flexible arms to the inside of the gutter. We use one of the trims as a guide just to get them in approximately the right positions. We'll start by just clipping one on, and then we'll grab another using that trim, aligning it with the first hole in the trim. Then we count along and install, so leave 4 blank holes and then put another clip at the location of the 5th hole. So we just grab more clips, keep counting along, leaving 4 blank windows, clipping on at the 5th. So here we have the gutter brackets, and here if we've counted along, left 4 blank and go in the 5th, here it's probably just going to fit. If that clip was going to go right on top of that bracket there, you'd go either one less or one more hole. It just means they're not perfectly equally spaced, but the benefit of multiple holes just gives you that flexibility to be able to dodge the brackets there. So we'll put that right there next to the bracket, which will still get through that hole, so that's okay. So the next process is rolling the mesh out. Before we do that, I'll just explain a couple of things. So with this Longline roof, typically it'll be on a fairly shallow roof pitch, like we've got here. We're going through the process. And what we're going to do is install the mesh, and we slit the mesh so that it basically goes straight across from the gutter, either side of the rib, and then we fasten it. If this was on a steeper pitch, and typically if the edge of the gutter is sort of above the level of the top of the ribs, then what you may do there is actually install it so that, let's say the gutter was up a bit higher, you may not slit it all the way down and expose the end of the rib. You would come up and over the rib a little bit, so it's probably a shorter slit, and then that mesh can sit there like that. It's just better on a steeper pitch roof. Now we'll actually roll the mesh along. Just carefully roll that along. Right, once you get to the end, then obviously we'll just trim that mesh to length. So I'll just trim it in line with the edge of the gutter there. Just using some tin snips. Right, so next is putting on the trims, and what the trim does is just sandwich the mesh between little spikes on the trim and the top of the plastic clips. So we'll need to just shuffle that mesh down to those clips. The clips are good just to stop that mesh sliding all the way off, and we just let it come down and rest against those spikes. And we just place the trims over the spikes, aligning them up. Now, because we use the trim as a template for positioning those, they should be in the right spot, but you'll find that the clips easily slide from side to side if you need to adjust any. Yep, so the next one goes on, and you'll notice that it will, and it should, just overlap the previous trim by 5 millimeters or so. This one though, obviously is a full length trim, but we're at the end of the run, so we just need to trim that to length just to match the length of the roof. We'll cut it there. Obviously it's a little bit easier if you have to cut through one of the windows. It's just less material to cut, but it's easy enough either way. The next step's actually to lock those trims on now, and we use the small locking plate plastic molding, and it just simply ratchets down each of these spikes, and it just overhangs the side of that trim. So you push it down and then kind of give it another harder push until you hear that last little click, and that gives it some good compression and sandwiches the mesh nice and positively. So it goes down and then give it that extra little push and click. So then with the 2 millimeter mesh, it's important to go along and actually provide or put a small crease in it, just an inch or so from the edge. It acts as a bit of a water break. Surface tension with the water can mean it can track along more easily on the smaller aperture mesh, so the crease just provides that bit of a water break and stops water skating off. So I'll go along and just crease that down. So the next step will be using the tin snips to create a slit at the location of each rib, and that's so that mesh can basically go down either side of that rib, like we were showing before. We can't just simply slit the mesh because there's width to that rib, even though it's fairly narrow. It's too wide for that mesh to just flex. So we need to cut out an actual slit, which is about 4 apertures wide, so for about 8mm wide, and that'll sit nicely either side of that rib. So what I do is just push that mesh down against the rib, choose an aperture which sits sort of two apertures out from the side of that rib, because also down the bottom of the rib there's a bit of a radius, so it just helps that mesh, just by going slightly wider than the rib, helps the mesh sit down in that pan a bit better. So we'll just slit down. You can actually use the 2mm apertures as a guide for your tin snips. Also just remembering to cut just a little bit past the end of that rib, because as that mesh goes down, the end of your slit's going to move closer to the rib, so that'll just close up the gaps nicely. So I'll just count along 4 squares, so 1, 2, 3, 4, and we'll cut down actually into that 4th one. So once we have all those slits cut and the mesh can nicely get down into the bottom of the pan of the roof, we just need to go along with some isopropyl or a degreaser of some form and just give that roof a little quick clean, really just in the points where these are going to stick, and it just helps give them that good bond. The next step is actually fastening that using our screw-free mini profiles. So just having a closer look at these, they're a little flat profile. On one end, underneath, there's a bit of 3M VHB tape, and that'll actually stick to the roof and sort of tack the mesh down. The second stage is to squirt in some liquid polyurethane adhesive into the little domed end, and that's what gets in and around the mesh and actually sticks it down to the roof. And just push the mesh down. Again, just align that so that the whole of the piece is over the mesh, and that tape's just sticking straight onto the roof. Give that a bit of a push. And just be mindful of the profile of the roof, and there's a radius at the bottom of that rib, so you don't want to be putting the profile right up against the side of the rib, because it won't stick down properly because it's not flat against the pan because of that radius. So just space it off that rib by like 5mm or so, and then you'll dodge that radius and it sticks down nicely to the pan. Right, then with the adhesive, with caulking gun, use ideally a dripless caulking gun, because as you back off, it releases the pressure and stops it just continuously oozing out the end. It just makes for a cleaner job. With the tip, don't cut it back too far. You don't want the diameter of that tip to be too big, and you don't need a big hole. But what you do want is for that tip to be able to go through that hole so that you can actually push the tip against the mesh, like onto the roof. Because that, by being able to get in there and actually push on the mesh, gets that glue in and under the mesh and ensures that it's sticking to the roof and to the bottom of the profile. All we do is we go along and we inject a bit of glue into each of these little ports. You'll sort of develop your own process. What I like to do is, push into the mesh, give it a good squeeze. Sometimes you'll see a little bit come out, like from under the edge, and that's not a bad thing. It means you've got enough in there. But as you come out, back off the pressure before you start taking it out, and then you sort of like wipe the tip under the edge of the hole. Yeah, so once we've got the glue in all those, then obviously it just needs time for that glue to cure. But what's happening is you've got the 3M tape doing an awesome job of sticking that down to the roof, making sure nothing moves while that glue's curing. So like if there's a bit of wind and things aren't going to get blown off and create a big mess. So the tape's doing its job while that glue's curing. Once that glue's cured, it's doing all the job for many years to come. To finish the job off, we can cut the spikes off the clips. So I'll use these tin snips, and that does a pretty good job. Once you've trimmed all the spikes off the clips, you've finished the installation. This is the finished result when you use the Blue Mountain gutter mesh screw-free system to install mesh on a flat pan roof like Longline.